Hey guys, it's Brooklyn Lou the Skeptic, and I am really excited today to have a special guest. Her name is Ember, and she's quite a character in this community. She's outspoken, but she's clear, very intelligent, and I'm excited to get to know her just a little bit more. So let's bring her on. Ember. How you doing, Ember?
Oh, I'm surviving, which is a hell of an achievement in this economy.
Oh, heck yeah. And it's always better to be alive than not alive, at least in my way of thinking.
It often helps. Yeah. You get a lot more done that way.
So, Ember, I've been following you here and there, on YouTube, and I see you on Mark Reed's channel, analyzing debates. I've seen in the comments of Punk Apostate, who I had on my show a while back, and been excited. And I would like for you to introduce yourself. Let us know what you're about.
I do a lot. Of course, I have my channel, Better Than Ember, here on YouTube, where I do all sorts of atheist type things, from promote feminism and challenge the patriarchy to debunk pseudoscience. And also, mostly, my primary focus is to try to build community, because we so much need community. But that's not the only thing I do. I also produce good news on the Transpositions Weekly, because we need more good news in the world. And I pop up here and there in a bunch of other places. Occasionally I'm on Skeptic Haven, and I do a lot, which is why I have a Linktree type website thing, betterthanember.com, which also has a list of all the other atheist, skeptic, and humanist creators I know about who aren't evil. I should caveat that, because there are a few, but yeah, that's on the website too. So if anybody needs to find people, I try to keep a list. We're on a list. Oh no!
I'm going to link your YouTube channel down below when people are watching this, and I invite everyone to go subscribe to Ember's channel. All right, she's quite brilliant, and I got to ask, bring us back in time a little bit to maybe like your upbringing and childhood and moving on into teenage and then in the adult world. Tell us about some of your life's experiences.
Oh goodness. Well, there's a lot. I grew up on a farm. My father was an alcoholic and my mother was a nurse who worked nights. So it was pretty much my grandmother who lived with us that did most of the raising. She was extremely Christian, and she kept trying to bring me to church, but I was that annoying kid who kept asking questions like, who did Adam and Eve's sons marry? Like where were the women? And the pastors would say something like, that's not an appropriate question. Or I'd eventually ask something where they'd just ask my grandmother not to bring me back. Oops. So she tried like hell to get me involved in the church, and it just never worked. I was too inquisitive. I suppose you could say I was always a skeptic. That's not to say I was always an atheist in the way we normally mean the term. Like many kids moving into my teenage years, I had these ideas that there might be something supernatural out there in the universe that science just hadn't figured out yet, because we're still learning a bunch of stuff. Quantum physics is still an open area of research. Hell, chemistry is still an open area of research. We're finding new species under the oceans and beneath the soil, and apparently on Mars now. Every day there's new stuff. So there's a lot we don't know. It wasn't impossible to me that we might find something supernatural. What really started to change that was when I began interacting with the online communities, and I'd run into, inevitably, I ran into Forrest Valkai, being a big science enthusiast like I am. And once the algorithm figured out I liked Forrest, it started showing me other shows Forrest was on, like The Line and The Atheist Experience. And I went, oh, what's this? And so I heard like Tracy Harris say things like, it's great that you believe that, but if you're trying to convince us, you have to give us a reason to accept what you're saying. And that's the key to skepticism, is why should I believe you? And once I had that nugget, I was like, okay, yeah, atheist is definitely the thing. Because until I have a reason to believe, and don't get me wrong, shit has happened in my life that still makes me question the existence of something supernatural. But I'm not willing to declare any particular God or even any particular magical force until I have a good reason to think so.
So that was how long has it been since you consider yourself atheist?
I mean, well, looking backwards, basically my entire life, I hung out with pagans and Wiccans for a while, but I never really managed to get into that either. Mythologically speaking, the people were great. They're fantastic folks, but like the mythology is really obviously mythology, you know, the same as Christianity. But as far as like actively identifying as atheist, probably, I don't know, 4 years-ish, maybe slightly more.
Not that long. I've been atheist probably 12 years, and I come out of evangelicalism. You know, mm-hmm. I was actually born again. You know, I was into that.
It's a big difference. I've noticed. Yeah. There's almost like two flavors of humans in our community, not to, you know, put people into camps and whatnot, but it seems like there's a bunch of people who deconverted and have a shared set of experiences. And then there's the group of people who were just never part of it in the first place. And they have a similar set of experiences as outsiders to the church. I mean, every single person I've spoken to who isn't a deconvert has that experience of being excluded. Like all the kids in your school go off to Sunday school and you're the only one who has to have a study hall with the teacher because you didn't go to Sunday school. Stuff like that.
Yeah. And I think there's a totally different, experience, like you say. You know, if you're indoctrinated into a high control religion and you come out of it, you have a lot to talk about your past. You know, mm-hmm. and the things that you used to believe. But it seems that you were kind of somewhat skeptical your entire life, you know.
Somewhat skeptical. I didn't have the words in the language because our educational system sucks. But I did have that wishful thinking inclination that there might be something mysterious or supernatural or hidden mysteries, you know, those mystery cults that wander around. In my late teens, I was actively working on that area of study. Like I was trying to make the soul make sense scientifically. And so I wrote a paper about it and I got it published. And then I got contacted by an organization called the Universal Life Church, which they're infamous because they will ordain literally anyone online. And they were like, basically my idea was that the soul can be thought of as like the animating life force of your body. It's the difference between an alive being and a dead being. And that's effectively it. And if you believe in something, it's like taking a piece of your soul and dedicating it to the concept of that entity. And so if you get like a whole church of people together and they all take a little bit of their soul and dedicate it to their version of a god, then you end up with something that's made of non-physical soul stuff, but has a great deal more power than any single mortal, even though it's made of these tiny little pieces. And if you expand that, and so you get millions of believers, even over 1 billion believers, you end up with this vastly powerful, non-physical entity capable of taking action in the real world. Ta-da! A god appears, you know? Except we don't actually see that. We never see some non-physical thing reach down and tweak reality. It hasn't been demonstrated. But I didn't put that in my paper. The paper was just about how a God might exist based on this concept of a soul. And so they reached out and they were like, our central thesis is that all religions are true from a certain point of view. And we think what you've done is compatible with what we're doing. And we'd like to invite you to join us. So even though I didn't have a specific religion, I became a minister. And then when I joined the Navy, I became a chaplain. So even though I've effectively always been an atheist, I'm an atheist minister, and that's kind of fun.
Well, there are a group of people out there that identify as atheist, but also consider themselves spiritual, and that's where all that comes in. It's like, what do you mean by spiritual? You know, I mean, I've had people tell me that I'm spiritual. They mean it as a compliment, you know, and yet I'm an atheist and I don't believe in living spirits and all that. But there still is concepts that we can relate to as human beings, right? And those concepts can play an impact in our lives, even though they are not actually real in the sense that, you know, we would consider real.
Yeah, like morality. There is no physical morality you can go touch and show people, but the concept is not only tangible in a metaphorical sense, but it's something you can express to another person and they know what you're talking about, you know?
Yes, and it's something we all can relate to, even though it's not, you know, tangibly real or, you know, doesn't exist in any way other than conceptualizations in our minds, you know, and what we believe does play an important role in how we live our lives. So, you know, I recognize all that. So when a theist would say, you know, I believe in God, I don't have any problem with that. All right. Because to me, you know, you're free to believe whatever you want to believe. But it's when you say, you know, for sure, or you know God, or you know what God says, that becomes a dividing point for me. You know?
Yeah. For me, it's when they say, I know what God wants. Like, you have to do what I say because I know what God wants.
Exactly. It's going over the line.
Mm-hmm.
So I suppose you're really into freedom because you express yourself well and you dive into controversial topics. For sure, just even being atheist is controversial in America. You know?
It always has been. It was starting to get a little better, and then we got overrun by evangelical extremists who want to bring about the end of the world as quickly as possible to make Jesus come back. Woohoo!
Now, you're also transgender.
Mm-hmm.
So how did that come about in terms of the timing with atheism? Did atheism play any role in that at all? I mean, what, you know, how did you come to be out there, you know, to be out in public as transgender?
It's a couple of different factors. Mostly it has to do with community, right? Like many trans people, I've known since I was very, very small. And growing up, the adults around me all told me it's not possible to change. It just does. It's fiction. You can't. And bear in mind, Christine Jorgensen was Woman of the Year in the early 1950s. Every single adult influencing my life was damn sure well aware. She was a household name when they were growing up. So they knew it was possible. We had the technology, and they straight up lied to me. But never mind that. I grew up thinking it wasn't possible, and I just had to be miserable my whole life. Whatever. By the time I found out as an adult that it was possible, I was in a marriage with children, and my spouse was more than a little, let's say, rainbow phobic. So it just wasn't possible to do anything about it once I realized it was possible. After we split up, I ended up having to take a job as an over-the-road truck driver, and when marriages end, often you end up needing a job that comes with a house sort of situation. And so that's not an industry that's super welcoming to rainbow flavored people either. So it just wasn't possible for that reason. I'd have been murdered immediately. After I started getting involved with not so much atheism per se, but the community, I was in a better position where I could transition, because that's the decision. It's not whether to be trans, it's whether to go through the transition. And I was feeling like I was too old now. I'd missed my shot. There was never a chance. But then I started meeting other people like Bree from Hive Psi, who's slightly younger than me, but we're in about the same age range and started only a couple of years ago. And she's fucking stunning. And I met Stephanie from, Stephanie does a bunch of things, including the transpositions with me and Bree, but also hosts on the line from time to time and does a bunch of other stuff as well. And she was a little older than we are now when she transitioned, and she's been a trans woman for like 25 years. And so like, it is possible. And once I realized it was possible, even at my age, there were a few other factors, like Maya Adkisson from the Maya Adkisson channel, where they do Bad Science Sundays. We were conversing one day about this subject because I'd been identifying as non-binary for a long time. I could not accept the label of a man, because my whole life I got that whole man up and screw your feelings and men behave this way. And I'm like, that's so not me. So I couldn't. So I was non-binary. And Maya said to me, I expressed that I was much more comfortable with the femme side of things. And she said, so you're a trans woman who just hasn't transitioned. And it kind of like set off a firecracker in my brain. She was right. I am a trans woman and I just hadn't transitioned. And here was all this evidence telling me that it was possible to do. So to make a very long story a little bit shorter, I did.
Now, I find it interesting, a couple of things that I just find interesting. So you knew your feelings about these things really young. Is that correct?
Oh, yes.
It wasn't something that you were unfamiliar with. You were in touch with your own feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever try to block out those feelings?
The best I could manage was ignore, sort of like, let's say a toothache. When it's a low-grade toothache and your insurance just doesn't cover dental or whatever the case may be, you just take some more Tylenol and try to ignore it.
I do that all the time.
Yeah.
But recently, I mean, I got to mention it because it's in the news. We've seen this assassination of Charlie Kirk. And
it's not really. To be an assassination, it has to be a political figure. Kirk was not elected. He did not hold office. He was not running for office. It was just a murder.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, but we saw him killed,
Mm-hmm.
And he obviously took a position that was anti-trans. I mean, this is well documented.
Oh, for sure. But in fairness, he was anti pretty much everyone except him. Like, he's anti-woman, he's anti-black, he's anti-Hispanic, he's anti-atheist. He just hates everything that isn't him.
Except Trump. I think he liked Trump.
Pluses and minuses. Apparently, he was making a big fuss about releasing the Epstein files.
Yeah, that's why I think some people were thinking maybe he was from the right, but it doesn't look like that was the case. It looks like his family was definitely right-wing politically, but it looks like he changed his mind, I guess, over the last couple of years.
That's what it's say. All the evidence about the suspect seems to indicate that he was a member of the Nick Fuentes flavor of extreme right-winger.
Right.
And that's polar opposite within the right-wing sphere of Charlie Kirk's flavor of extremism. Like, they're both extremists, but it's spectrums within spectrums. We being, center people, left people, whatever, it looks like all these wingnuts are on the right, and that's true on that spectrum. But within the sphere of the right, there's another spectrum. There's the high grade fascism people. There's the high religion people. There's extremes of all flavors within that fringe, and these two groups, Kirk's flavor of extremism and Fuentes's flavor of extremism, hate each other. And it seems to be the case that the suspect decided to act on that. Why he chose right then, why he chose those circumstances, there's room for conspiracy, but we don't need to have a conspiracy to explain it,
Yeah, and we don't really know yet, or the whole picture, and we may never know the whole picture. That's just the way these things go.
Considering who's in charge, we probably never will. Because, when Kennedy was assassinated, it took a long time to get the full story, and that's when we had competent people in charge.
Now, I'm curious to know, since you've come out transgender, whenever that was, how many years ago was that?
January 2nd of the year before this past year. Okay.
22.
There's a few different dates. That's the date I decided to go for it. It took me a little while longer to actually do the legal stuff. It took me a little while longer to actually get access to medical care. And also, I had been publicly non-binary for as long as I can remember before that. So where do you want to put the pin? But that's the date that I decided I was going to try.
Now, once you went public, where people were seeing you, as transgender and labeling you, right? when people started doing that, did you face any backlash from the right side, the right-wing conservative Christian world?
A little bit. There's always the internet trolls, the people who thrive on hating other people, and a few of them put in an appearance. But weirdly, I got some acceptance from them as well. Like, for example, a flat earther popped into one of my live streams and said, I disagree with everything you say because I'm a flat earther, but I used to think you were hot, but now that you're a girl, I'm out. I'm like, thanks, I guess.
Hey, that's okay, right? You gotta laugh, right? Maybe you had people who used to think you were hot, think you're not hot now, but you probably got some people thinking you're hot now that used to think you weren't hot.
Maybe it's hard to say. When you're a trans person, it's impossible to distinguish based on just a random encounter whether a person actually likes you or is just into the idea of a trans person or is just fucking with you so they can get your attention and then try to break your heart. That happens too. Who's to say? The important thing is that I like me better. I'm healthier. I'm so much happier. And anything else that comes along with that is just icing on the cake.
Ember, that was priceless right there. That's priceless, because that's what it's really all about. It's about you having peace. And that's what, we're all on this earth, and we all, I think, want to have peace. That makes sense to me. But a lot of us never find it, in humanity. People live their whole lives in turmoil, and they're not peaceful within themselves. I have found peace in my life, so I'm with you, And I think it's sad when people want to tell each person or tell individuals what they have to do to find peace, because it's going to vary, right? I mean, you obviously had to come to terms with your own personality, with your own inner self. And you did that apparently early on, and you understood who you were, right? And then it was a matter of eventually taking the various steps guided by your mind and where you wanted to go. And here we have Ember, and it's fabulous to me. I mean, I like that.
And that's why my channel is called Better Than Ember, because I'm better than Ember.
Yeah.
I'm also a sucker for puns, if it wasn't obvious.
Yeah, but you definitely have a happiness to you, and I don't sense any harshness. You know, you're not a harsh person, and I think that it's important for people to see someone like you, because we have a political agenda on the right, which is really pushing that people like you, meaning transgender, are somehow not happy, and they're angry at everybody.
Well, I mean, there's plenty of room for anger, to be sure. Like when people on the right start telling all people, that they need to show their genitals to be allowed to use a bathroom, or, kids aren't allowed to play in sports because of what kind of minority they happen to be. There's a lot to get really angry about. But as far as me as a person, I don't know. I only have a regret that it took me so damn long to actually be able to be me and to actually live my life.
Well, I'm glad you did, and I'm glad you're able to do that in America. I'm very happy that you're able to do that. I hope it never turns the other way. And when you were talking about, was it Christina Jorgensen?
Christine Jorgensen,
Christine Jorgensen. Now, I remember Christine Jorgensen probably was, I was born in 1963, so I don't think, I think she was around that time, right? But I remember her when I was pretty young, when she was on the cover of the magazine that you were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And I also remember Dr. Renee Richards, the tennis player.
Yeah.
Right. And the strange thing about it, looking at what we're seeing today, is Dr. Renee Richards, she competed in tennis, and she wasn't, people didn't say, oh, you can't compete in tennis. I mean, she competed in tennis. She wasn't a great tennis player, like one who won major tournaments, but she was a professional tennis player, and that was accepted at the time. I remember watching tennis. I didn't look at it as, oh my gosh, she's bad or has some sort of a crazy advantage, So.
Yeah. And that's the thing. We can never talk about people being regular people. It's only people like A.B. Hernandez who does actually win some stuff now and then. Or, God forbid, Leah Thomas, who tied Riley Gaines for 5th in one race. Both of them beat by 4 cis girls. No. Trans people are dominating everything all the time. Obviously not. Renee Richards, she was very good, but she was no Serena Williams,
No, not even close.
This whole biological advantage thing is obvious nonsense, but that's true for most things that come out of the right. Is there obvious nonsense?
Yeah, they're highly exaggerated, like completely exaggerated. That's how I see it. It's like, we don't even see that many trans athletes. I mean, they exist, but they're not, if you listen to the right, they're taking over all of sports and this exaggeration. Right. Meanwhile, you're pressed hard to find a trans athlete. It's like,
isn't it so wild though that they make such a big deal about their concern for women's fairness in sports, but they give zero fucks about fairness for women in, SA cases or abortion rights. Like when it's something that is an actual problem women face, it's crickets from the right.
So how do you position yourself or think about yourself when it comes to women's rights?
I mean, I've always been in favor of women's rights. I've been a feminist as long as I knew what that was. And that isn't just because I knew I was a woman and just hadn't transitioned. It's just obvious, it's the morally correct position to be in favor of equal rights for all people, human rights for all humans, period. It's very simple. And there's no flaws in that. So every other position that's been offered to me has a clear and obvious flaw. Like it should only be rights for white people. Why? That clearly hurts other people. It should only be rights for men and not women. Women should be stripped of the right to vote. Well, why? There's never a good reason, and there's always obvious harm.
Yes. So how is your channel going? Where would you like it to go, and how is it going?
It's starting to pick up steam again. This kind of touches on the whole what happened after transition thing. I did get some serious pushback from the atheist community. It turns out all of us not believing in a thing doesn't mean we believe alike on anything else. And I lost about half of my community very, very quickly. I had one of my biggest supporters at the time exploded over it and tried to end the channel. He got all public about canceling his Patreon and this and that. And it made a big dramatic mess. And a lot of people left. Like probably, I was just over 1,000 subscribers at the time, and I was on track for 1,500 by spring of that year. And then all of a sudden, I barely maintained monetization. And it was like that for an entire year. I eventually did get to 2K subs fairly recently, because we've been picking up steam again in the last couple of months. But during that entire year, I'd gain maybe 1 or 2 subscribers a month. And it's because I'd appear somewhere, I'd gain a few subscribers, and then they'd realize I was trans and unsubscribe. And it was frustrating. It makes you sad because you feel excluded from your own community, but it was also frustrating because you're doing the same things you've always done, debunking flat earthers and creationists and right-wing nationalist Christians, shall we say. Nazis, you might call them. But because of what kind of person you are, and more precisely, what kind of person you're perceived to be, the people who are willing to listen, who want to be part of your community changes.
Yeah, I've seen that. Most recently, I think there was kind of a riff when it came to Derek from Myth Vision. And he had put out something that was kind of anti-left, and there seemed to be people, atheists on both sides, kind of taking a political position. And that's okay. I mean, atheism for me is just not believing in God. I mean, I could not believe in God and believe in anything else. There could be a variety of different things that I might find I do believe, other than I don't believe in a God. That's it.
Right.
You know?
Like there's
But
pro-life atheists, for example, or,
exactly,
anti-abortion atheists sort of thing.
exactly.
And,
And
they get,
there's
they
atheists
get
who
all
would
emotional.
be right wing. You know, I think
Mhm.
I've encountered a few. I mean, I'm more leftist. I'm progressive, but I've encountered some atheists who swing to the right, at least on some political issues, and that's okay. That doesn't bother me.
Yeah, it's the same sort of situation. What you believe governing your own life is fine. It's when you start to tell other people how they need to live that there's a problem.
Now, Ember, I gotta ask you, because there's some questions just keep coming to my mind. You have a family, is that correct?
Mhm.
Because you mentioned your family. Your family, do you all get along? You have a pretty good family?
It depends on what you mean by family.
Okay, let's talk about that, Ember.
So, it's a complex situation with my parents because, like I said, my father was an alcoholic and was never around. My mother worked nights and was never around. So, and all the adults in my life lied to me about necessary medical care that I needed. So it's complicated, but I don't harbor them any especial ill will either. There's probably stuff that I have to work through about that, but I've got shit to do. As far as my extended family, they've mostly already cut contact with my branch of the family because of some controversy that happened with my parents. So I don't know how they would react to me because they haven't had contact with me for many years before that already. So that doesn't really matter. With my own kids, things are pretty good. I mean, the three oldest are adults now, and my oldest is openly non-binary and founded a pride club at their high school before they graduated. So obviously no issues there as far as that goes. My son is all my children who are old enough to have a position are somewhere on this flag. They all have their own things. And for the most part, they're just like, whatever, be you, to some extent, they're happy for me or even proud of me. But for the most part, they just want me to be happy, which is really nice to see.
Now, without mentioning any names, any specifics, have you been dating over the last decade, or I don't know if you married. I don't know, but
it's been a very long time. I had one serious relationship in 2019-ish with a non-binary person. But yeah, they were a very nice person. I mean, we're still friends. I value so much about their creative brain and their caring nature and so forth. It just didn't work in our case, and they met another person that was like their perfect match, and so they got married and now have a child, and it's wonderful, and I'm happy for them. But as for me, it's been that person, and that was the only person literally in the last decade, possibly more.
So you're single.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You're single.
Yep.
Happily single.
I'm there's parts I miss about having a relationship. Like I'm a very romantic person. I love the gestures, both giving and receiving, the feeling of connection, the snuggling, holding hands has always meant so much to me as a person, just as for example. So there's a lot that I miss about that, but there's also a lot of the unpleasant side effects that I don't miss. Like, very few of my relationships have been with what you might consider to be good people. And I've kind of lost faith in humanity that there really are many good people. I know they exist. I know some of them, like Mark Reed, for example. He is a proactively good man, you know? It's just in the offline world, there don't seem to be any people, you know? So, and I'm not the kind of person who will just be with someone to be with someone. It has to be someone I actually want to be with. And there just isn't a person like that in my offline life. I'd rather be alone than be unhappy.
I fully can understand that. You know, it's not easy to have a connection, especially as we get older. You know, it's not that easy for anybody, really. You know, and there's a lot of people who just settle, right? They'll say, well, you know, I get along a little bit with this person, so I'll try to make it work. But it's hard to find a real connection that's a lifelong type connection. You know?
Oh yeah. And especially considering that people change. Like, you know, my former spouse that I had children with, we were very, very much aligned when we first got together, but we were also very, very young. Like, they were just getting out of high school and I was just getting out of the military. And we both wanted to have children as quickly as possible because I had this brilliant idea that if you have children while you're really, really young, then you will have grandchildren while you're still young enough to chase them around, and you have the best odds of seeing great or even great great grandchildren. So it made total sense. Don't do that. That's a bad idea. I love my children. They're wonderful, amazing individuals who make me so very proud. But that was a bad idea. Getting financially situated first reduces the stress in your life tremendously. But I do digress. The main point is we both changed. We grew. It's cliche to say we grew in different directions, but we did. You know, it's hard for me to articulate how I changed because I was on the inside observing things, and I could articulate how they changed, but it would come off as mean. So suffice it to say, we reached a point where we disagreed on the nature of what a relationship even means, and it just wasn't viable anymore.
Do you still get along?
Cordially in passing. They're not my favorite human. They're not the kid's favorite human either, for various reasons that I could get into, but would come off as mean. But yeah, we don't really talk because every time I've ever heard from them in the last several years, it's been to either ask for money or demand I do something that I'm like, we're not married. You don't get to demand what I do. No, sorry.
Now, you were in the military, the U.S. military, right?
The Navy, yes.
Was that a good experience?
No.
No?
No.
What happened?
Well, I mean, I got blowed up for one thing. In addition to being a chaplain, I also, so the Navy, like most military branches, as I understand it, they decide what you want to be, kind of thing. And so I wound up in electronic ordnance disposal because I had the brains to do it. And I wound up in a situation that, to just keep it very, very brief, was explosive. And I'm the last living member of my team. It was extremely unpleasant.
Wow. So you're a veteran. You know, that would be without a doubt. I will thank you for your service, you know, to the country by putting in that time. Now you're an atheist activist, a trans activist. Is there any other issues that you're passionate about?
I mean, well, feminism, obviously. I've been getting a bit more aggressive with the feminism lately. That's been sort of the general gist of my morning shows these past few weeks, is feminism and feminist related content, because in this age of manosphere, red pill, incel bullshit, it needs to be insisted upon. And it's also kind of fun, like today, as we're recording this, we were watching a video, me and a few of the other girls, about forbidden adult acts. And it was kind of hilarious because there was this pastor who was listing off these forbidden acts, and the things that actually, some of them were just laughably silly, but some of them that actually were bad were all things the church does. Like, you know, age of consent type things, you know?
So, needless to say, you're not into the purity culture of Christianity.
No, that's one of the ones that it's come up a time or two, and we have another show either this week or next week. It's on the schedule specifically dealing with purity culture. It's one of the topics that's in the crosshairs. I try to help people deconstruct with that kind of thing, but I'm not going to pull my punches about how damaging it is.
Yeah, I do think it's very damaging psychologically. You know, I'm with you. And when you did come out trans, did you get Christians trying to save your soul, or any of that go on?
Not really, not for that. Mostly they were loving disciples of Jesus who referred to me as a freak and reminded me to get my prostate checked and you know, whatever hateful things they could think of. Like, none of them actually tried to reach out and like extend the grace of God. A few people, I must note, who actually are Christians who care about the message of Jesus, tried to be loving and compassionate, but not in a way like, you need to get away from the sinful lifestyle and find Jesus. It was more like, I care about you as a person, and the rest of this shit doesn't matter. And that's really nice to see.
Yeah, I think that you can't find too much harm with that. I mean, I don't find anything wrong with somebody who is Christian, you know, could be as Christian as anybody could be, but as long as they treat other people with respect and it's coming from actually caring about the person, then it's a lot easier to deal with. You know,
and it's caused that and experiences with some of the right-wing atheist groups that are just as hateful and say the same horrible shit as the other right-wing extremists. They just don't say because Bible anymore, but it's still the same bullshit. I've come to be less aligned with the identity of atheist. I'm still publicly atheist because I still believe it's important. We are a minority and visibility fucking matters. But that's less of an issue that I push so actively as humanism, because I would much rather fight side by side with those Christians who believe that humans are what matter, that human rights for all humans are what matter, than with the hateful right-wingers who also happen to believe there's no God. It's a priority thing, right? Humans matter much more than mythology. Whether you agree with the mythology or not, I can set that aside if you're with me that humans matter.
Well said, Ember. Well said. And I wholeheartedly agree. I mean, in this country, we have to come to a point where we do look at people as other human beings, not just a side, a team, a tribe, but actually look at other people and say, hey, I want the best for these people, you know? And if that's coming from the Christian side, I'm all for it. All right. I'm happy with that. I'm going to always speak out against hatred, you know, and dividing the country according to religion, and religion trying to legislate in our government. I will always be against that. And I'm always going to be against people who want to bring religion into government. You know, I'm always going to be against that. Always. So I'm not going to bend when it comes to things that I feel strongly about. But I want to be able to at least say that there are some people on the other side that are trying to do the right thing for other people, you know, and it's a hard thing to, it's a line that's easily crossed when you're doing content, you know, because it's easy to just to slam people, you know.
Oh,
But
yeah, for sure. I mean, I've done it myself. I've been known to get a little worked up and say, all these Christians, when I mean the hateful bigots who are hiding behind Christianity as a shield from consequences.
I think you have a very mature, nuanced approach to that, and that's why, you know, you could be what's big, your superpower. I think, you know, and I mean that's a very important thing in today's world. You know, you're balanced. I mean,
I
I
try.
can see that by talking.
I'm mortal. I fuck up. I fuck up a lot. Ask Maya.
Yeah, we all do. We all do, but there's still.
I'm willing to hear when I screwed up, though. And to me, that's a big difference between people on our team and people on the extremes. Whatever extreme is they cannot internalize the idea that they are capable of error. I want to know when I'm wrong so I can stop being wrong. That's the point of science. That's the point of skepticism. That's the point of bothering with morality in the first place, so we can do better. Why would anybody not want to do that? I don't know, but that's me.
Seeking truth. I mean, I want to live my life seeking truth. You know, and
exactly.
That's foundational to me. You know, I want to know what's true. You know, I don't want to be the brainwashed fool walking around, you know, filled with propaganda. I don't want to be that person.
Yeah. It's harmful. It's not just damaging in that you live a mean, cruel life filled with darkness and bitterness and suffering and bring nothing but suffering to other people. So die old, alone, and unloved, which is horrible in and of itself. But it does damage to society. Like, everything we do has an impact on all the people around us. We can be a positive influence that helps uplift people, make lives better, maybe inspire people to go do good in their communities and whatever else. Or we can be neutral and just exist, and that's fine. Nobody has an obligation to do anything. It's your life, live it how you want. But then there's the people who are actively harmful. And that's the problem. That's the extremist position. We need to screw over all these people. They're not just making their own lives awful. They're not just bringing suffering to other people. They're hurting everyone. They're hurting our entire civilization, because we know from sociology, from biology, from evolution, from freaking everything we study, that our greatest strength as a species is our diversity. Our diversity of experience, our diversity of perspectives, our diversity of opinions and insights and knowledge, and all of these things, we are better together than when we try to pretend we're a monolith and everyone else is subhuman. And so these people who pretend they have the exclusive lock on truth, they're diminishing their own capacity to grow. Whereas the rest of us who want to, we understand we can be wrong and we can always do better, and want to surround ourselves with people with different perspectives. We will always learn more, faster, and do better, and outpace those hateful fucking dinosaurs.
Man, that was an incredible statement of truth right there, Ember.
I told you I'm a minister. I don't preach very often anymore, but sometimes the Spirit comes upon me.
That was very inspirational, and I think it hit on so many different aspects of the country we're living in right now. You know, and I hope some of that spreads. You know, I hope it spreads and becomes something that somehow, some way, in our future, that we can unite as human beings. You know, that's like a dream of mine, you know, to see that. And It's only with that sort of understanding that it could ever happen. It can't happen any other way, you know?
Well, there was a man who rather famously had a very similar dream, and he also said that the arc of history bends towards justice, but only if we push.
Who was that?
Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Ah, very interesting. I don't know all his quotes, but I certainly think he was an incredible leader. And here I'm an atheist, but I think he was an incredible leader. You know,
He had some good things to say, that's for sure. And to be fair, that's probably not an exact quote. I'm bad with quotes. I can't even quote the Bible. I'm not that kind of minister. So it's a paraphrase before people get all up in the comments. Well, actually, what he said was.
Well, I find it interesting when I look back because, you know, I'm 62 years old, going to be 63 real soon. And I was not really involved in the civil rights movement. I was a little boy at the time, so I didn't really understand it all. But I actually remember like key moments, you know, when things happened because it was all over the news and I guess everybody was talking about it. And I know that we had Martin Luther King and we had Malcolm X. And they both were fighting for civil rights. So I would say they both were on the same side. You know, they were trying to accomplish some of the same things. But
they had similar goals, very different methods. But what's important to note is they were both assassinated.
Yes.
But, you know, people are like, oh, you can't do things this way because look what happened to thus and such. Well, look what happened to Dr. King. They were both assassinated. The extremist assholes who want things to be their way and will kill anyone who tries to upset that balance will kill anyone. There is no, oh, you have to do it the right way or you're putting people in danger. They will come for you anyway. That's not saying do things Malcolm X's way, but understand the nature of the situation we are in, because the same people that killed those two men back then are the same people, ideologically speaking, that we're dealing with right now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But I think that there was such a distinct difference in the way they were going about trying to do change. Mm-hmm. Whereas, you know, Malcolm X was for like segregation, for separation, you know, whereas Martin Luther King was more for unity. Mm-hmm. Okay. And Malcolm X seemed to, you know, be okay with violence. Right. Whereas Martin Luther King went the other way, you know, no, we have to do everything peacefully.
Exactly.
And I would say that should apply today. And I'm on the side of Martin Luther King for that.
I tend to lean in that direction myself because there's a lot of reasons. As a veteran, I understand violence better than most. I was also a repossession agent for 3 years. I understand violence better than most. Avoiding violence is definitely the better way. But to say we have to do it that way, to say that's the only way, that's the correct way, that runs the risk of painting ourselves into a corner. Like, remember, the powers that be made Martin Luther King's birthday a holiday and not Malcolm X's, because they're trying to tell you this way is good and this way is bad. And while I'm not endorsing Malcolm X's perspectives or methods, I am saying diversity of perspectives matters.
Well, I want to see in America when there is no distinction in the social world, in our culture, of somebody who is transgender, someone who is not transgender. Like, I want to see no distinction. I know that's probably going to take a long time, but it's the normalization, I guess you would say, right? Like it's kind of like normalizing and understanding. And I want to see that. So
it can potentially, it can happen remarkably fast. For example, in the early 1800s to mid 1800s, there was no such thing as a white person. It was Germans and Englishmen and Irish people and Italian people and Poles and so on and so forth. Everybody was the group of their nationality or their ancestors' nationality. It was only when black people got their freedom that all of a sudden there's white people now. Us white people have to stick together. It's a similar thing can happen. You know, the Irish and the Italians notoriously hated, despised in our society, the absolute gutter trash, filth, untouchables to be walked upon and strode over and spit at. And then suddenly, when the social situation changes, we're all white people together. You know, that bigotry vanished within a generation. And the same thing can happen, and it doesn't necessarily have to have a common enemy situation to make it happen. We just have to agree that the bullshit of the past is not important and to stop doing it. Easier said than done, I know, but it is.
Yeah, that's the thing. When you, it is somewhat easy when you think of it in those terms, but we're dealing with all of these, you know, religious beliefs and political ideologies, and people jump on their team and they trench themselves in. And that's what seems to make that simple thing very complicated. And that's what takes time, I think.
Well, yeah, it's intentional muddying the waters on the part of the people who either want power or want to keep power. That's what propaganda is. It's making a big old mess, creating culture war issues where they don't have to exist in order to distract and draw people to one side or the other. You know, like trans athletes. You know, this past election cycle, the Republicans, Trump specifically, but the Republicans generally, spent hundreds of billions of dollars on ads about how unfair it is that trans students get to compete in school sports, and the Democrats said absolutely nothing about it. Now that's disappointing on the Democrats' part, but the point is the Republicans spent so much money to talk about something that's harming no one and really nobody cared about until they were told to care, until they were fired up by bullshit, lies, rhetoric, and propaganda.
So
they muddy the water intentionally. So
they use a lot of money and a lot of effort to do it. And that's the thing, you know, that's what we're fighting, really. You know, it's like
it's a manufactured issue. And in fact, it's one of the issues we know is manufactured because they said so. It's not a matter of people suddenly becoming aware of a thing. As my friend Stephanie mentions, you know, trans people have competed in sports for decades and decades and decades, and no one cared even a little bit. It was never even a tiny problem until it became a political issue. But that's not even the main problem. It's that back in 2019, I forget the exact date, the bathroom bills, the North Carolina bathroom bill that got repealed, a few other states, Massachusetts had an amendment. Well, it was sort of a double amendment because trans people were specifically protected from discrimination under Massachusetts law. And so there was a ballot proposal to remove trans people from being protected so that they could be discriminated against. And they tried to make the bathroom thing a political issue, and it didn't work. And so the people who were pushing it wrote an article on their own website. It was called Mass Resistance. You can find there's a reference for it on my website, betterthanember.com, on the gender sci section. A lot of the stuff that I talk about frequently is linked there, so I can just show my references. But they wrote on their own website, Mass Resistance, saying, you know, when we made up the bathroom myth, It was supposed to polarize people, and it didn't work. And other groups in other states take heed of this. We need to make up something else to get people worked up, or we'll just be wasting our money, flushing it down the toilet, yelling into a void, and no one cares. So they admit they made it up. And then immediately after that, it wasn't bathrooms anymore. It was suddenly sports. They just pivoted to the next issue. They just fling out bullshit issue after bullshit issue until they find something that gets people fired up enough that they no longer care about losing their health insurance or the price of eggs or the price of gas or being able to import a PlayStation, because they're so angry some other minority is allowed to exist.
Yeah. People are really easily swayed. I mean, that's something I've observed for many years now. You know, they're easily brainwashed, so to say. Not everyone, of course, but you know, if you don't have a methodology to try to discern what is true, and the methodology is sound, you're very vulnerable to just swinging out into just believing what you hear. You know,
right?
It's like it's very human beings. You know, are sheep in a way. And I don't want to be a sheep, so I try to do my homework. You know, I want to find out what is real, what is true. But I find that so many people, when you talk to them and they'll come out with something, a statement about something political or religious, and then you go a little deeper and ask, well, you know, why do you feel that way? It becomes, well, I heard it. You know, somebody told me something. And it's like, that's it?
Yeah.
Someone told me
why do you believe it? Because confirmation bias. It confirms my biases, so I believe it.
Yeah.
Holy shit. Wow.
Yes.
Yeah, like I often say on my channel and other channels that one of the big reasons that I consider religion to be dangerous is because in order to believe it, you have to disable your critical thinking. And once you disable your critical thinking, it renders you vulnerable to all manner of nonsense, from MLMs to Nigerian prince scams and you know, right-wing politicians.
Yes.
If you can't think critically because you intentionally turned it off, you're in trouble.
Yes. I feel the same way. And I've talked about it here and there, but that's well put. That expresses my feelings as well. You know, if you just follow religious teaching, you already shut your mind off. It's already shut off. You know, you're not considering other viewpoints. And then when religion makes it so that if you consider another viewpoint, that's really bad just to consider it. And then you know, you're in a box and you're kind of controlled, right?
Yeah. I've got a clip of a fellow who fancied himself a scientist, but he was actually a young Earth creationist and therefore a conspiracy theory pseudoscientist. And he went on and on for quite some time about how if you believe things without question, if you hold beliefs that are in opposition to the demonstrable evidence, if you believe something because you want to believe it and not because it can be shown to be true, you're indoctrinated. And I'm like, my dude, that's you, buddy. That is you. Look in the mirror. Holy shit.
Projection. So, Ember, I want to let you go, but I want to ask you to summarize two things, all right? Because you really you're speaking to two issues in America. One, of course, is religion and, you know, its role in our country. And the other one is transgenderism. And of course, now I found out you're into feminism, right? So it's
I do a whole lot of things. That's
Right.
one of the reasons I mean, I run a Comic-Con in Watertown. I'm also an intersex person, and I advocate strongly for that. It doesn't come up as often as I'd like, but I'm making a point of talking about it more for the same reason, because there's not a lot of people like me who are visible. And so I want to be visible for other people like me.
And I appreciate that. I mean, I think it's important I sincerely think it's great, and I support what you're doing. All right, because that's what it's all about. You know,
Mhm.
people, I think, have to see people like you. I believe it's important. You know, because if people, let's say you grew up in a fundamentalist Christian home, all right, which a lot of people in America have, all right, and you've
Mhm.
told your whole life that this is bad, you know, you know what I mean? You've been told, you know, this is bad. God says it's bad, all right?
Mhm.
And then you come across someone like you who doesn't fit into the people that they associate with and see every day, it becomes kind of mind-boggling for them, you know? And I
Mhm.
think it's very important for them to see a person who is well-adjusted, contributing to society, and is different than they are. I think that is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, representation matters for a whole lot of different reasons. One friend who comes to mind, I've mentioned a couple of times now, Maya Edkison. She says that she felt like she couldn't be part of the community because it was like a white boys club. And then she saw Mandisa Thomas on the Atheist Experience, and she was like, "Oh, maybe there's room for me in this community." Representation matters, and Maya being part of this community was one of the more important facets of how I got to be where I am. So it's that diversity of ideas thing again. You know,
Yeah.
representation matters for the people like you, but also for the people who aren't like you, so that they can learn that it's okay for people like you to exist, so they can learn about other kinds of people, and really to make them question their preconceptions about what makes a good person.
Yes. And I think it's vital now. That's one of the reasons I was so excited to have you on. Okay. Because I don't, obviously, I don't have no big following, but I take it serious. You know, I mean, I take this
We
seriously,
do what we can.
you know,
That's all we
but
can do.
I, I want people to see a person like yourself so that maybe they can at least think, you know, gee, maybe not all trans atheist people are like Tyler Robinson and go out and kill people, you know? I mean,
I
I
mean,
think,
in fairness, he isn't like any of us because he
yeah,
isn't one of us. But
I know, but I want people to somehow put that together, you know? So it's very important to me that people get a view of people who are transgender, that just very decent, loving people. I think that's very, very important in our country today, because on the right, they are actually trying to portray you as hateful and vicious and all
and
these things that
violent.
are just simply not true. You know, this is not true, but they try to paint it that way.
Yeah, it's rhetoric and propaganda. And like I said, the entire point is for it to be obviously and absurdly untrue. It's to make people override their critical thinking and buy in anyway to be part of the club.
So let me ask you just to summarize or just think about, and then I'll let you go because I'm over time on my schedule. And I
That never
appreciate you.
happened.
I appreciate you staying with me. Okay. But let's take transgender and atheism, just those two things that you're actively involved in. What vision do you have, like, for our country where maybe we might get to that would be far better than where we are today in both transgender issues and atheism? Take them one at a time. And, you know, I'd
Well, I
love to
mean,
hear your thoughts.
ultimately, they kind of have the same goal, that the existence of groups like ours, of all the different flavors of humanity, being decent people, trying to be better people than we were before, but also better than the hateful people who murder each other over being the wrong flavor of extremist, that sort of thing. Being better people starts to shift society in a way where we realize that being good people matters so much more than what kind of people we happen to be. I'd like to see a world where being atheist, maybe not the default position, but isn't looked down on, where it's considered with the same weight as an actual Christian scholar might look at the Hindu texts and say, this is a thing that's just as important to its believers as my beliefs are to me, and there's a good reason for it. I can see the wisdom in these other ideas, where atheism is held in the same level of esteem, or at least mutual respect. And that creates an environment where all people are esteemed with mutual respect. The same thing with trans people, where, you know, everyone else, let us say, understands that we're just people. And fundamentally, what's in a person's pants is nobody else's business. So why everyone cares, I don't understand, but it's neither here nor there. I mean, I would very much like to see trans people be celebrated, not for the bullshit that we've had to go through, but for showing that it is possible at any point in life to become more yourself. It doesn't always require surgeries or medicines or changing your outfit or changing your name or any of those things. You don't have to do any of those things to be a trans person, but that it's always possible to say, I'm going to be more me and be happier and more fulfilled than I was before. And the fact that trans people do it and show it can be done can be a beacon to everyone, that we can all put away the things that make us suffer and live our fucking lives.
Well said. And if I was Christian, I'd say amen.
Hallelujah.
Yes. I can see why you're a minister. But that's, no, really, that's awesome, Ember. And I want to thank you for coming on. I got to learn more about you today, and I'm so happy you're out there doing what you're doing. Okay. So anyone who's watching, please go over to Ember's channel, subscribe, like, comment, get involved in the discussions going on there. It's very important.
Join the live streams. We're doing them all the damn time lately.
Yeah. Just quickly mention, where you're at and where people can find you.
Yeah. Like I said, my main channel is Better Than Ember. All the other stuff I do is linked on my website, betterthanember.com. But on the main channel, I'm doing live streams often lately. I've got a morning show that runs Monday through Friday, starting at 11 a.m. Eastern. And we discuss mostly feminist-related topics, but it touches on intersex and trans and atheism and all sorts of things. And it's fun. And I hope you come join us, and, would love to see you in the live chat. I also do the debate reviews with Mark Reed, like you mentioned, Lou. Those are Saturdays at 8 p.m. Eastern, p.m. Eastern. And Mark and I alternate. Every other week we're on my channel, and the other week we're on his channel. So you got to subscribe to both to make sure you catch all of those. And then Sundays, I do an evening show to lead into my Is Bad Science Sunday. So it's very rare I go more than 24 hours without being on camera.
You're busy. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much, Ember. And I hope to hear from you more, and I hope to communicate with you more. So, yay. Have a great day.
Toodles.